name of this year is Rus and Halacha L'Moshe Misinai, and let's draw out some text from the final chapter of Rus. Boaz approaches Ploni Almoni, the man who is more closely related to Machlon and Kilion, to offer him the opportunity to do the mitzvah of Yibum with Ruth. We know this story, right? So what does the Goel, what does this potential individual who has the opportunity say? So we'll start with Pasuk Beis. The Pasuk Beis says, "Vayikach 10 anoshim miziknei ha'ir," that Boaz takes 10 people from the elders of the city. Vayomer shavu po vayeshev, and he tells them all to gather around. He says, remember, this is going to be important. He says, he gets a minyan together, not just of Pasha Yidden, he gets a minyan of Zakanim, of elders, and he says, stay here, I want you to be witness to what's happening. Pasuk Gimel. Vayomer lagoel chelkas asada shel Leachinu Elimelech machra Naomi hashava misadei Moav. There's a field that belongs to our cousin Elimelech, and Naomi now wishes to release ownership for the person who's going to take it over. Pasuk Dalid. Vani amarti. Egele oznecha lemor kinei neged hayoshvim v'neged ziknei ami im tigal gaol v'im lo yigal hagidali ve'eda ki in zulascha ligol b'anochi acharecha. So he says, you have first rights of refusal. He says to Ploni Almoni, just put it over here. He says, you have first rights of refusal. If you want to take over the field, fine, you can purchase it from Naomi, but if not, I will, because I'm second in line. Pasuk Hey. Vayomer Boaz, so the person, Ploni Almoni, says, sure, I want to buy it, I'd be happy to buy it. Pasuk Hey. Vayomer Boaz biyom kenoscha asadim miyad Naomi umeis rus ha'moaviyah eshes hameis kanisa lehakim shem hameis al nachal aso. He says, but you have to realize, you're going to have to also acquire the death of the decedent, either Machlon or Kilion. It's not clear who she was married to one of the sons. Pashta, she was married to Machlon, so you're going to have to also marry her. She's part of the deal. If you want to get the field, you got to get Rus in the deal as well. So Vayomer Hagol Pasuk Vav Lo Uchal Ligol Li Pen Ashchisis Nachalasi. He says, no, I don't want to destroy my future progeny. You go ahead, Boaz. I can't do it. So there are a number of issues here that need to be clarified. It seems like that Ploni Almoni was reluctant to marry Rus because he felt that there was some problem with his future progeny. Was there a halachic problem of marrying Rus, or was there not a halachic problem of marrying Rus? If there's no halachic problem of marrying Rus, why then is he worried about destroying or in some way tainting his future progeny? So now let's take a look at the Gemara and see how the Gemara understands this whole story. It's a famous Gemara. We're not going to be able to go through the entire story, but we'll just start it. But we know that Rashi foreshadows the Gemara, and he says, because Ploni Almoni was aware of the halacha, or rather he thought that since Ruth was a Moabite, he was not allowed to marry her, because the Torah says, Lo Yavo Amoni u'Moabi b'Kal Hashem. And he did not realize that the prohibition of marrying a Moabite was only a Moabite man, but not a Moabite woman. But if he thought that there was a halachic, an Isser D'Oraisa of marrying this woman, why couldn't he just say, state in the pasuk, you're not allowed to marry a Moabite, and I can't marry her. It's usher for me to marry her. Why did he say instead, I'm worried about tainting my future progeny? What about his own Isser? It's like a Kohen saying, you know what, I don't want to marry a divorcee because I'm worried that my children will not be Kohanim. What about the Isser to me? It's usher to me to marry a divorcee. So why did he say it in that way? And also, why did he suggest to Boaz, you go ahead and marry her? If it's an Isser D'Oraisa for me, it's an Isser D'Oraisa for you. I won't eat the chazer here, you have the chazer. It doesn't make any sense. So let's take a look at the Gemara, where Rashi gets this from. The Gemara is in Yevamos, starts on Ayin Vav Amud Beis. It's based on a line in the Mishnah, which is underlined, Amoni u'Moabi asurim v'yisron yisur olam, avol nekevo sehem mutaros miyad. The only Ammonites and Moabites that may not marry into the Jewish people, even after they convert convert are the males, but the females are allowed to marry if she converts to Judaism, you're allowed to marry her right away. The Gemara, we'll skip to the next paragraph. The Gemara asks, Minahani Meili, how do you know this? Amar Rabbi Yochanan de Omar Kra, V'chir'o Shaul es David Yotzei Likras HaPlishti. So, the famous story that King Saul is faced with the prospect of defeating the Philistines, but the problem is that they have this mighty warrior Goliath, and how are we going to defeat him? So, he sees David. David is a youth. He comes out to greet the Plishti army. Amar el Avner Sar Hatzava ben Mizeh Hanar Avner. So he turns to his general Avner and he says, who is this boy? Who is this young man? Who is his father? Vayomer Avner Chei Nafshecha HaMelech Im Yadata. And Avner says, by God I declare, I don't know. Or by you I declare, by your soul I declare, O king, I do not know who this boy is. So the Gemara asks, V'lo Yodalei, how can you tell me that King Saul did not know who David was? Previously in Sefer Shmuel it says that Saul and David had this very loving relationship, that David was King Saul's bearer of arms. So how can you tell me you didn't recognize him, you know who he was? Ella Avua Kamashil. Or rather, says the Gemara, he was inquiring about David's father. How can you tell me he didn't know who his father was? Doesn't it say that the man in the times of King Saul was elderly and distinguished among men? This pasuk is referring to Yishai, David's father. He was a man that was so distinguished. He was such a gadol hador that everywhere he went he had this huge entourage. So how could Saul not know who the great Yishai was? Of course he must have known who Yishai was. So Hachi Kamar Shol. This was what was bothering King Saul. Imi Peretz Aseh, Imi Zerach Aseh. I'm concerned about the future of this young man. I see great potential in him, and I'm worried for my own future. Does this young boy, is his father descended from Peretz or from Zerach, the two children of Judah? And we know that whoever comes from Peretz is destined for the monarchy, and if he comes from Zerach, he's great, but he's not destined for monarchy. Imi Peretz Asi Malka Havi, Shamelech Poretz Lasos Derech Veinamachim Biyado, Imi Zerach Asi Chashiva Ba'al Mahavi. I just gave you the shortened version of what the Gemara says. So, my time Amarle Sha'al Alei. So, why does it say that King Saul was inquisitive about David? In other words, what did King Saul see in David to see that he was an unusual, an extraordinary young man? So the Gemara says, that it says that when David volunteered to fight Goliath, it says that King Saul gave him his suit of armor, or his fighting clothing, his fighting armor. But it says that it was Madav, which means that it was to the exact specifications of King Saul. But it also says about King Saul, that he was taller and larger than everyone else in the nation. The very fact that King Saul's armor fit David perfectly, seems like it fit him miraculously to a T, implies that this was what King David was destined for, to wear the armor of Saul, even though, under normal circumstances, Saul was a giant of a man, and there's no way that a young man like David would have been able to fit into it. So King Saul immediately sees, hey, there's something unusual about this boy, we better find out what his story is. So here comes the relevant portion. Amar le Doeg HaEdomi. So Doeg HaEdomi is one of the characters in Sefer Shmuel, and he is ascribed by the Gemara as being a tremendous Talmud Chacham. He was a tremendous scholar. And Ad Sha'ata Mashil Alav Im Haganu Lamalchus Im Lav, Sha'al Alav Im Rov Lavo Bakalim Lav. Why are you asking whether he is fit to be a king? You should ask an even more fundamental question. Is he fit to even marry into the Jewish people? Maybe he's not worthy or able to get married. My time at Tekasi Merusa Moabia, because he's a descendant of Ruth, the Moabite. So Amar Le Avner. So Avner says, "What's your question, Tanina? We've already learned in previous generations, Ammoni v'lo Ammonis, Moabi v'lo Moabis. We know that, like the Mishnah says, the halacha only precludes a male Ammonite and a male Moabite. It doesn't preclude a female. Elameata, mamzer v'lo mamzeres." So Doeg ha'edomi persists. He says, according to that reasoning, because the Torah uses the male conjugation of the words Ammoni and Moabi, the Torah says, Lo yovo mamzer bikal Hashem. A bastard can't come into the congregation of God, so maybe it only refers to male mamzers and not female mamzers because it uses the male conjugation. And we know that that's not the halacha. It's mamzer ksiv mumzar. So the Gemara answers because the word mamzer implies any person, regardless of whether they're male or female, who have some kind of spiritual taint, such as a mamzer, is precluded. And that's how I know that it applies to males and females. Mitzri v'lo mitzris. But the Torah says that a Mitzri convert, an Egyptian convert, has to wait 3 generations before entering. Are you there going to also say that it's using the male and not the female, so therefore female Egyptian converts this law does not apply to? So Shiny Hacha, the Mefarish time into crust. So they answered him and said, no, Doeg, you have to realize, Ammoni and Moabi are exceptional cases because the Torah tells us why they're not allowed to enter into the Kahal Hashem. Why? Because they did not come out to greet you with bread and water. So if that's the case, that the Torah is telling you that they did not show you proper hospitality when you were passing through their territory in the desert, darcho shalish lekadem, v'lo darcho shalisha lekadem. We can only fault the men of the Ammonites and the Moabites for not going out to greet the Jewish people, because only men normally go out to greet. Women, because of tznius, stay inside the tent. So therefore, because the women could not be faulted for this sense of cruelty and apathy, therefore the halacha does not apply to them. That's the reason. It's only a din by Ammoni and Moabi, and it does not apply to all other pigumim in the Torah, to other pigumim in the Torah. But the Gemara says that Doeg persisted, and he says, "Haya lahem lekadem anoshim likras anoshim, v'noshim likras noshim." So Doeg says that doesn't make any sense. The men could have gone out to greet the men, and the women could have gone out to greet the women. So maybe the women are to blame. So ishtik. So the Gemara says that Avner was silent. He didn't have a response. Miyad vayomer hamelech shal ata ben mizeh ha'elem. And that's when King Saul said, we got to find out who this kid is. Is he capable of even being not just the king, but is he capable of being Bikal Hashem? So Hasam Karilei Nar, Hakul Karilei Elem. So why does the previous pasuk call him a Na'ar, which is a youth, and here it calls him an Elem, which implies even younger than that? Right? Why use 2 different words which imply a slightly different age of the child's development? So Hachi Kamarle, Halacha Nisalma Mimcha, Say Usha'al Bebeis HaMedrash. The word Elem comes from the word Lehitaleim, to hide or to be hidden. And therefore what he was alluding to is that Shaul said, I clearly see that we don't know the halacha as to whether David is a kosher guy or not. Go and ask in the Beis Medrash Doeg and find out the facts for me. So Shaul, Amrule Ammoni v'lo Ammonis, Moabi v'lo Moabis. So Doeg goes to the Beis Medrash and he asks, is David kosher or not? Because he comes from Ruth the Moabite. And they say he is kosher because only men are precluded, not women. And Ruth was a woman, so she's okay. Akshalu Doeg Kolhani Kushyasa. Doeg went ahead and challenged them. All of the questions that he had asked Avner previously, he asked everyone in the Beis Medrash the same question. Ishtiku. And finally, when he got to his final question, he had them all stumped. Boy lach ruzei alei. So at that point, he wanted to make a public announcement that this young man, David, is not fit to be Ba B'Kal Hashem. And then what happened? Va'amasa ben ish u'shmo Yisra Yisraeli asher boel Avigail bas Nachash u'chesib Yeser ha'Yishmaeli. So there's a man in Sefer Shmuel who's known as Amasa. In one place in Shmuel, he's known as Ben HaYisraeli. Another place he's known as HaYishmaeli. So which one is it? Was he a Yisraeli or was he a Yishmaeli? Was he an Israelite or was he an Ishmaelite? The Gemara says, Omar Rava Malamed Shechogar Charbo Ki Yishmael. This teaches me that no, of course he was Jewish, this guy Amasa. But he was violent in his insistence in the following law to the point where he drew his sword like an Arab warrior. And he said, Kol mi she'eno shomeya halacha zu yidoker b'cherev. Anyone who does not accept the following halacha shall be stabbed with this sword. Kach mikublani mi beistino shel Shmuel haramasi, Amoni v'lo Amonis, Moavi v'lo Moavis. He says, this is the law. I have this Kabbalah from the Beis Din of Shmuel. This is it. And if you don't accept it, you're going to die. That was it. That ended the debate. It's a Madna Gemara. It's a very problematic Gemara because it seems from this Gemara that Amasa silenced the whole debate. What about all the kashas on Amoni v'lo Amonis, Moavi v'lo Moavis that Doeg had asked? Like, okay, so just because you have a bigger sword than I do, you get to win the debate in the Beis Medrash? Since when do people win debates in the Beis Medrash? By weapons. You win the debate in the Beis Medrash by asking kashas, and whoever wins using argumentations wins the debate. This Gemara doesn't make any sense. But more than that, you see from Rashi that this doesn't just go back to Shmuel Haramasi, to Shmuel the prophet, Moavi v'lo Moavis, but it goes back further. Who does it go back to? Boaz. It goes back. Rashi told us that the reason why Boaz gathered together a minion of people was because he wanted to teach them the halacha of Moavi v'lo Moavis. Right? You see that in Rashi. I mean, you don't see that clearly in Rashi, but it tells us that this guy Ploni Almoni, who didn't want to marry her, thought the halacha was Moavi v'lo Moavis, and Boaz set him straight. If you take a look at the Gemara in Ksubas Daf Zayin Omid Beis, which is in source number 4, we'll just take a look at the bottom line. The Gemara says, it's referring to a pasuk that we talked about, that Boaz took 10 men and he gathered a minion together of Zikanim. So what do you need that pasuk for? We won't go into the whole discussion in the Gemara. Amoni v'lo Amonis, Moavi v'lo Moavis. That the reason why Boaz gathered a minion together was to teach them the halacha, that the law of Amoni and Moavi does not apply to women. And the Isal Gadaitach Libracha Lo Sagid Alav Zikanim. You can't tell me that he was only gathering them together to get their blessing. Because if he was only gathering them together to get their blessing, he didn't need 10 Zikanim. The reason why he gathered 10 Zikanim from the Sanhedrin was so that he should get a quorum of rabbis to accept the halachic teaching. And the Gemara says, well then, why did he need 10 people? So the Gemara explains, Lifir Sume Milsa, because he felt it was important to publicize the halacha to the Zikanim. Now, if this is true, what the Gemara in Ksuva says, that Boaz had taught this halacha while Ruth was still alive, and that was his justification, and he had gotten the minion together, then you have a number of questions. You have a question on Doeg HaEdomi. How can you ask a kasha on a previous sock that was already gepaskened already from the time of Boaz? And Amasa, who pulls out his sword and he says, I have a Kabbalah from Shmuel Haramasi's Beis Din, he should have said, I have a Kabbalah going back to Boaz. Shmuel is still alive at this point.
So why would Doeg be paskening the Shiloh? Why did he just not Shmuel? He was the Gadol Hador.
That's a good question. It's a good question. Perhaps maybe Shmuel wasn't available at the time. Shmuel was he may have been in Shiloh. He was in a totally different area. So could be that they would have had to resolve it by going to Shmuel. But Amasa came and said, this is my Kabbalah. So let's take a look at the Brisker Rav. There's some, because this was typed, and I don't think it's ever been reset, I'm not sure. This is always the way that we learned it in yeshiva. But this is from the Chidushei HaGriz from the Brisker Rav, and he says as follows. He says, V'tzorich biur. We have to try and understand this. Chada, my chidush Amasa bekach mekublani mebeistino shel Shmuel haramasi. Right? What was Amasa adding to the debate just by saying that he had a Kabbalah from Shmuel? Habarishona kavar Omar Chanina, Amoni, Kvar Omar Tanina, Amoni velo Amonis. Avner had already quoted a brisa that they already knew. In other words, Avner had also cited a halacha that he had as a tradition, that it only applies to males and not to females. So what is Amasa adding by saying that I have a tradition from Shmuel? And despite Avner citing a previously known Mishnah, or Brisa, or whatever, some Mishnaic teaching, Doeg still felt entitled to say that if I can find a refutation to that, I can refute it. So why couldn't he refute Amasa as well? So what was he adding? He says, we have to explain a little bit more. What about the Gemara in Ksubos that says, Demai d'chsev berus, vayikach asara anashim miziknei ha'ir, vayomer shavua. So he says, why does the pasuk say that he gathered together 10 zikanim and made an oath? By the way, I just want to tell you incidentally, it's very interesting. The whole context of that Gemara in Ksubos is, where do we know that you need a minyan for Sheva Brachos at a wedding? So it's a machlokus where we get it from. But one opinion is we get it from this din of Vayikach Asara Anashim. He took 10 men because he was about to make a chasana. So there's actually a shaila in the poskim for Sheva Brachos. Does the chasan count as one of the 10 for Sheva Brachos? So if you learn it from this pasuk of Boaz, it sounds like he doesn't count because he took an additional 10 men other than himself. But we paskin like the other Manda Omer that we learn it from the other pasuk in Ksuvas, which is B'makelos Baruch Hu Elokim Mimekor Yisrael B'makelos. When you have a kahal, you should bless God. You should make Sheva Brachos. So from there you see that the chassan does not, he can be part of the minyan. But that's just an aside. So in any event, why did Boaz gather these people? Boaz he gathered them so that he could make that drasha. And he felt that you needed 10 to publicize the halacha. Ayin sham. So the Brisker Rav asked the following question: Vim kain kivar bimei Boaz nidrasha v'nifsaka kivar hahalacha damoni v'lo amonis. So it was already gepaskined in the times of Boaz. It was already known of psak halacha that was publicized in front of 10 zikanim that this is the halacha. So how can Doeg come along now and declare him to be pasul? You understand? Everyone understand the question? Okay? So just because he had a svara, just because he had a way of reinterpreting the pasuk, he says, how can you challenge a halacha that's already been gepaskined by a beis din of prior generations? Fine, you have a kasha on the interpretation of the pasuk, but it's already been accepted as a psak halacha within Klal Yisrael. He says, it would seem to me as follows. Dihinei beis din hagadol haya koveya uposek halacha al pi beis derav. Any Sanhedrin, any beis din could establish halacha in one of two ways. Aleph, Mimasha Hayudorshin Be'echad Miyud Gimel Midos Shahatorah Nidreshes Bohen, either using the hermeneutic principles of looking at a pasuk and saying, based upon the Yud Gimel Midos Shahatorah Nidreshes Bohen, the 13 principles that we read about in the davening and the karbanos in the morning, I can look at the pasuk, look at the particular verbiage of the pasuk and derive a halacha. That's one way of deriving psak halacha, using Gzeira Shava, using Kal V'chomer, using Klalu Prat, etc., etc., etc. But there's another way. Mimasha Nimsar B'Kabbalah Mehalacha L'Moshe Misina. The other way is not using psukim at all, but a halacha L'Moshe Misina. Now, he's about to quote the Rambam, and that's why I gave you the second sheet which has the Rambam on it. So take a look at the Rambam for just a second. The Rambam is in the first chapter of Hilchos Mamrim, and he tells us as follows. I just want us to read the underlined sections from the end of Halacha Beis and the beginning of Halacha Gimel. I hope does everyone have that sheet from the Rambam? The Rambam tells us as follows. There's a pasuk in the Torah that says, Al pi ha-Torah asher yorucha ve'al ha-mishpat asher yomru lecha ta'aseh. Right? According to the Torah which they teach you, you must follow, and it's lo sasur, do not deviate, yamin usmal, right or left from whatever they teach you. So the Rambam teaches us based on the Medrash, Arehu Omer al pi ha-Torah asher yorucha, elu ha-takanos, v'ha-gezeros, v'ha-minhagos, sheyoru bahem l'rabim, when it says Al Pi HaTorah, it refers to rabbinic law. Chazal many times knew that this was not required by the Torah, but they instituted rabbinic law to make a fence around the Torah. That's what the words Al Pi HaTorah mean. Ve'al hamishpat asher yomru lecha ta'aseh, the second part, which says based on the justice or the judgment which they tell you must follow, elu dvarim sheyilamdu or sheyilmadu osan min hadin be'echas min midos shahatorah nidreshes bohen. This refers to a derivation of law that Chazal extract from the Torah verbiage using the 13 principles. Okay? Mikol hadavar asher yagidu lecha, and the third phrase is whatever they tell you, zu ha-kabbalah shekiblu ish mipi ish. This refers to a Masorah that they received one generation to the next, halacha l'Moshe Nisina. Three different categories of rabbinic law. One is pure rabbinic law, which does not have a din of deoraisa. Second legislation of Chazal has a status of Torah law because it's derived from the Yud Gimel Midos. And the third type of rabbinic legislation, which also has the status of Torah law, is halacha l'Moshe Misina. Okay? Says the Rambam at the beginning of halacha Gimel, he says, Divrei Kabbalah ein bahem machlokes la'olam. V'chol davar shetimsa bo machlokes biyadua she'eino Kabbalah mimoshe Rabbeinu. He says, when there's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, whenever you find that in Shas, there's not going to be Rabbi Meir says it is halacha l'Moshe Misinai, and Rabbi Yehuda says it's not halacha l'Moshe Misinai. There's no debate. If something was passed down from generation to generation, no one argues with that. The Rambam lays down the law. There's no such thing as saying that there's a debate on Masorah that comes from halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Now this has to be qualified very carefully, because we do find sometimes a rabbi says, Im Kabbalah hi nekabel. If you have a tradition, I'll accept it. But there are other times when someone says, I heard from my Rabbosai that this is halacha, like I spoke about when we talked about the Tanur Shel Achnai in the Pirkei Avos Shir, that sometimes someone will stick to their guns because they have a Masorah, and Rabbi Yoshua still says, no, lo b'shamayim, we're not going to accept it. So this only applies when a person says that I have a Masorah that goes back to Moshe Rabbeinu. He has to know that it goes back to Moshe Rabbeinu, and then there's no way there can be an argument about it. However, u'devarim shelamedim midhadin im iskimu aleim beisin hagadol kulo harei iskimu. But when it comes to hermeneutically derived law, then that's dependent upon the acceptance of the majority of the Beis Din. And if you have a debate, some rabbis say that this is a valid hermeneutic derivation, and therefore the halacha should be based on this kal v'chomer, should be halacha X. And another group of rabbis say, no, we don't look at the drasha that way. We think the halacha, the Torah is not teaching me that, because we have a different way of deriving it. So then, how do you decide what the halacha should be when you have such a machlokas? Acharei rabim lahatot, you go after the majority, and that's how you establish the halacha. This is in essence what the Rambam has just told us. There's a very important distinction between halacha l'Moshe Misinai and deriving law from Yud Gimel Midos. Halacha l'Moshe Misinai is not subject to debate. Yud Gimel Midos derivations are subject to machlokas, and you have to go according to the majority. Fine, let's go back to the Brisker Rav. Sazak the Brisker Rav. He quotes the Rambam as saying, "Ve'al hamishpat asher yomru lecha, devarim sheyilmedu osa min adin ve'echas min amido she'atorah nidreshes kohen, mikol hadavar asher yugidu lecha zu ha'kabbalah shekiblu ish mipiyish." That's the end of halacha beis, which we just saw in the Rambam. Ve'hanafkamina bazeh. So he says, so what's the practical difference between the two? De'im halacha zu kavu midrash shebe'echad mir gimel midos. The ramification is as follows. If the Beis Din, or if the rabbinic body of the time, establishes law based on the Yud Gimel Midos derivation, Yachol Beis Din Gadol Shedarshu Becha Min Avidos Kifi Sheniru Be'einav Shetomar L'Shofet V'Goymer V'Chuli Ad Kam L'Shona. The ramification is that the Rambam says later that there are times when a Sanhedrin will decide the halacha to be X, and a later Sanhedrin, which has greater authority, can overturn the previous psak of the previous Beis Din. And that, says the Brisker Rav, will also apply to halacha that's derived from the Yud Gimel Midos. Just because Beis Din A said we derive from the Gimel Midos, if you have a later Beis Din which says we don't agree with that drasha, and we have a larger body of a Sanhedrin, they can overturn, in theory, they can overturn that previous drasha. But when the halacha is established using a Mosaic tradition, then a later Beis Din can't overturn a halacha l'Moshe Misina. It's part of an unbroken chain of tradition. How can you overturn that? That you can't overturn. Ayin Sham bePerak Aleph halacha Gimel Divrei Kabbalah Ein behem machlokas la'olam ad kan l'shona. Citing the Rambam's language itself. Okay, so we'll see. So you, of course, so you're starting to pick up where the Brisker Rav is going. So let's see where he goes with this. Ulav Fizeh, using this argument, Mispaer Hetei Parsha Zu Shel David, Shedanu Alav Im Kasher. Now let's go back to the story of King David, where they were deliberating over whether he was kosher or not. Acharei ma shemeidan idanim pasak boas kfar halacha da'amoni v'lo amonis, because really 3 generations before, Boaz had already established with his Beis Din of 10 Zikanim that the halacha is amoni v'lo amonis, that women, Moabites, are allowed to marry into the Jewish people. However, what the deliberation was, did Boaz cite this as a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, or did Boaz cite this based on a hermeneutic derivation of the Yud Gimel Midos? That's what they were deliberating over. V'lazeh yachol doeg, the Beis Din acher haya v'darash hu acher Kacheres, Shemotzatam Listar Ha'alacha Hapsuka, Kifi Kol Sugyas HaGemara, Shehiksha Altam HaMatirim. When Doeg knew that Boaz had paskin that he was allowed to marry Rus. However, he felt that Boaz derived it based on the Yud Gimel Midos. He says, my Sanhedrin is just as potent and as powerful and as scholarly as Boaz is. I have a right to challenge that psak, and if I can show that he erred in this method of derivation, I can overturn the psak halacha. And therefore it's legitimate for me to paskin otherwise. Kevin shenifsika b'yud gimel midos shahatorah nidreshes bahen kemosha kasafti, thinking that it was part of the yud gimel midos. Uchamochein ma shemevi batchila tanina amoni v'lo amonis. And furthermore, when Avner came up to him and said, Doeg, what are you asking about King David? I have a Mishnah that says Amoni v'lo amonis. What's the issue? Rak midrash be'echad miyud gimel midosu. That too, Doeg was able to dismiss and say, that's also only based on the Yud Gimel Midos. That's also only a hermeneutic derivation. And therefore, if I can challenge it, I can find a flaw in it, I'll overturn the halacha. But now let's look at Amasa. Amasa comes along and he says, I have a Kabbalah. He pulls out his sword and he says, you got to accept my psak. Hainu halacha l'Moshe miSinai. What he was telling them was, it's not just a hermeneutic derivation. I have a halacha l'Moshe miSinai that was taught to me from Shmuel, and therefore you cannot refute it with logical arguments. And based on that, you can't refute it even if you have good logic, even if you have a different way of interpreting the pasuk. It's a halacha l'Moshe miSinai, for goodness sake. Kevin shalacha mekubela sime halacha l'Moshe miSinai. V'alpi divarenu, and based on the way we've just explained it, Mevur heitev ma she'omer hagoel pen ashchis nachalasi. Now let's go back to the story in Ruth. Now we can understand why Ploni Almoni was only worried about his progeny and not worried about the halacha of marrying a Moabite. And he didn't say a more basic issue, I'm not allowed to marry this woman. His error was the same error as Doeg. So the reality is like this. The Ploni Almoni, the Goel, he heard that Boaz paskind Amoni v'lo Amonis, Moabi v'lo Moabis. He says, okay, Boaz, you're a great rabbi. I'm not going to argue with a great rabbi. You just, with your based in paskind that Ruth is permitted to marry, I have no problem with marrying her for myself. Ela shetoan leBoaz im shezet tov shani yachol lisa'ena dehabishazu adinka. But that's all well and good for today. You're paskining I can marry her right now. But what's going to happen in a generation from now, 2 generations from now? Another base is going to come along, they're going to forget, or they're going to challenge what you, everyone thinks that they're bigger, or they're smarter, or whatever. Someone else is going to come along, and they're going to argue with you because you're only basing it on the Yud Gimel Midos. Someone will have another way of darshaning using the Yud Gimel Midos. And as a result, someone's going to declare that all of my children that are born from Ruth are going to be puzzled. So fine, I can accept the psak for me today, but I'm worried about what's going to happen generations hence, that someone's going to paskin that my children are not kosher. You had a similar kind of controversy in Eretz Yisrael, where there was a group of converts who had already been accepted by the Rabbanut, and then this created a whole controversy recently in Israel, where there was another base that had challenged the authority of the converting body, and it creates chaos, it creates havoc. What about all the children now that are born from this? from these converts, right? So this is what, history repeats itself sometimes. This is exactly what the Goel was concerned about. So he says, because then someone will come along and change the law and say that Ruth was not permitted to get married. But the Goel was wrong in one respect, is that while he believed that Boaz had a right to paskin that way, he was under the mistaken impression that Boaz was only basing it on the Yud Gimel Midos and not on a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, the EF Shalistarosa Kamosha Kosafti. And really, when it comes to halacha l'Moshe Misinai, it's irrefutable. It's not subject to refutation. So now, using this, you understand the whole story very well. The Goel wasn't concerned about his own halachic, his own neshama, shall we say, his own halachic rights to marry Ruth. He was worried about the future. But it's a huge chiddush. I mean, if you think about it, what the Brisker Rav has set down for us is that we have to look at every daf of the Gemara, and we see that halacha l'Moshe Misinai is a whole different genre. He's basing it on the Rambam, so it's not like it's such a huge chiddush, but he's bringing out something for us that we need to understand for the future. Whenever we learn Gemara, we have to realize that there can be a machlokas when something is derived from Yud Gimel Midos, but when it's based on halacha l'Moshe Misinai, it's not subject to refutation. Any questions, comments? Maury?
You have halacha l'Moshe Misinai. You see, and then somebody turns around and says, no, it's based on Yud Gimel Midos. Aren't you opening up? You still have a debate then. Is it halacha l'Moshe Misinai or is it Yud Gimel Midos? Like we see here.
It sounds like that as long as someone can come along and say, and he has a reliable testimony, and we know that we have reason to believe that he's not falsifying his testimony. He says, I have a Kabbalah that it goes back to Moshe Rabbeinu, then you have to accept it. I want to just add something to that. So therefore, no one can say, no, you don't have a halacha. How can someone say that you don't have testimony? Someone can say, I disagree with your logic, I can disagree with your method of derivation of law, but they can't disagree with something that transcends the Yud Gimel Midos. Halacha l'Moshe Misinai is dafka not based on textual sources. Many times the Gemara will tell us that there's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai without there being any textual source whatsoever. So therefore, it has to be accepted. You can't say you refute it. There's just an
go back and say, as long as you have a Kabbalah from the Gemara, we'll be okay.
That's right. That's why the Gemara sometimes says, Im Kabbalah hi nekabel. Sometimes you'll find an Amora saying, listen, if this is a Kabbalah that you have from previous generations, then I'm not going to argue with it. But if it's based on your own logic, I have a logical arguments to lodge. Why the drama? Why the drama of the sword? It's a good question. It's possible that the Gemara is speaking metaphorically, that the sword is the sword of the halacha l'Moshe Misinai. That in itself is the sword. It's the sword of finality. It's the sword of final psak that cannot be argued with. So I don't know whether you have to say it was mamish or physicals, or maybe it was, but that could be what it means. I just want to point out that, yes, please.
Sorry. Number one, the Rambam seems to say that if there would be a machlekes about something, so it's like a raya that it's not halacha
l'Moshe Misinai, right?
Here he's saying that this debate of Amayit Ulamanis was a machlekes at the time.
Before they knew that it was halacha. In other words, in the Beis Medrash at that moment, they were not aware that it was halacha l'Moshe Misinai. They thought that it was a drasha.
But he's saying the fact that there are people arguing about it, does that not itself indicate that it's not halacha l'Moshe Misinai?
Well, I think what the Rambam's saying is, if someone comes along and tells you, I have a Kabbalah that goes back to Moshe Rabbeinu, then you can't argue with it. But if you don't have any evidence for that, if you don't have any evidence that it's a Kabbalah that goes back to Sinai, then you can't make up that fact. You can't just say, well, that's the halacha that goes back to Moshe Rabbeinu. You have to have someone who has reliable testimony for that, right? That the the term, the Maritzchias and other Achronim tell us that sometimes, and this has to be understood very carefully, sometimes the term Halacha L'Moshe Misinai is employed by the Gemara in hyperbolic terms. Sometimes when the Gemara wants to emphasize that this halacha is not subject to refutation, they will use the term halacha l'Moshe Misinai even when it's only a din d'Rabbanan. The Maritzchias, I think he says, is at the beginning of Chagiga, if I'm not mistaken. If you want the source, I don't have it in front of me. If you want the source, get in touch with me. And there have been many generations of tshuvas that have also used the same hyperbolic language in order to emphasize that a certain practice within Klal Yisrael cannot be undermined because of their fear that if this particular practice was undermined, it could possibly unravel an entire system of halachic practice. The one issue that I wrote an article about once is the din of mitzitza b'peh. Mitzitza b'peh, there's a tshuva from, I believe it's from the Binyan Sion, or it's maybe from the Maram Shik. I forget which. They both have a tshuva on mitzitza b'peh, but one of them says that everyone knows that mitzitza b'peh is halacha l'Moshe Misinai. And there's no source before the 19th century tshuva of the Maram Shik that it's halacha l'Moshe Misinai. But one thing we do know is that historically, Bris Milah was a battleground against the nascent reform movement, the nascent Reformation. And so sometimes you find that Chazal will use the term halacha l'Moshe Misinai in not lav dafka terms, and you have to know, you have to discern very carefully when it's being used the dafka as halacha l'Moshe Misinai in its formal sense, and when it's being used in its informal sense. But here we're saying that the din of Moavi v'lo Moavis, Taka is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, and therefore is not subject to refutation. Yes, Jeff?
I was going to ask, when Boaz and Ploni had their discussion, and when he had to attend the elders there, did it seem like he purposely wasn't getting into a discussion with him because he himself wanted to marry Ruth, or?
That's what I'm suggesting. That's a possibility that he did it for, because
he could have said right out.
He could have given full disclosure, and perhaps he held back some information to make it not as inviting for the goer. It's a possibility. I don't know. I don't know for sure. Okay? All right?